It is 627 AD, and Emperor Tang Taizong, a little over a year into his reign, is reviewing the list of successful candidates in the imperial examination. Taizong had come to power the hard way, fighting and winning battles against powerful rivals on behalf of his father, Emperor Gaozu. But he knew military success would never be enough to keep the dynasty in power. He needed men who were both loyal and able to administer his domains. These men were the very shepherds of the empire. In 221 BC, the ruler of the state of Qin, Ying-zheng, finally overcame the rival state of Chu to become the first emperor of the United China, Qin Shi Huang. The dynasty he founded was supposed to last for 10,000 generations. It barely made 15 years, but it marked China forever. One of the reasons for the success of the Qin was their willingness to impose strong bureaucratic and legal measures to unite the territories that came under their control. They required a highly capable body of administrators, and to achieve this, the first emperor did not balk at abolishing the old system of rule based on aristocratic feudal privilege.
以强大的中央集权克服地方分散性，是大同帝国得以长期延续的主要原因。王朝通过建立庞大而完备的官僚体系以及相应的权力制衡机制，将国家意志贯彻到政治、军事、经济、文化、社会管理等各个领域，而科举制度对维护和保障官僚机器的正常运行起到了重要作用。
The year is 1819. To the north of Beijing's Forbidden City, the great city bell tolls, and the giant drums of the drum tower are beaten to announce an auspicious day. An master of ceremonies calls the name of Shu Kai-ye, top scorer in military examination,
102年，女皇武则天呢就首开武科考试，武科是由兵部主持，考试的对象多为从军者，还有一部分非从军的修子人。考试内容呢为成文兵法和武艺考核，武科就给了一些不善文辞之人开辟了一条入仕之路。
However, since in practice the exam focused on combat skills more than military strategy, it did not continue for long after the fall of the Tang Dynasty. In the 10th century, the new Song dynasty emphasized the importance of civil affairs over military. The military examinations were suspended for more than a century. The first top scorer to be recorded in the military examinations occurred in the late 11th century, a full 500 years after the civil exams. Emperor Song Taizong had a deep distrust of those who engaged in martial arts instead of scholarly pursuits. In the early Song dynasty, a minister in charge of the imperial examinations was approached by a leading general who recommended his friends and relatives for preferment. The minister was unhappy, but said nothing. When the list of successful candidates was published, the general was enraged to find that none of his recommended men were on it. In a fit of pique, he sent some of his officers to harangue the minister. The emperor was deeply disturbed, but took no action out of respect for the general's past support, and, no doubt, his continuing power as well. Another incident made him even more determined to weaken the power of the army. An investigation into a robbery at his chief minister's home showed that the intruders were soldiers acting on orders of a senior commander.
宋朝初年的武人，大都出自官兵子弟，在战乱中成长起来，没有机会读书，更没有机会得到圣贤之教诲，变得夷蛮粗鲁，也是时局所致。但是，作为王朝最高统治者的周王英，当然希望自己管理下的社会安定和谐，即便从道德风尚而言，他也要求提拔文人，压制武人的嚣张气焰。
Only the emperor remained sober, silent, and the emperor continued. Which among you could resist your subordinates, urging to don the imperial robe, even if you did not wish for it?
赵匡胤实际是后周的武将，以后周军军统帅石寿星等人结拜为兄弟。公元959年，年仅7岁的后周有子继位，赵匡胤在石寿星等人帮助下，发动陈教兵变，王袍加身，夺取后周政权，建立了宋朝。赵匡胤深知武将八股的危害，以宰相赵普灭商，削夺大将兵权。
The generals heeded the emperor's words and duly submitted their resignations, for which they were generously rewarded with land and titles.
"中国古代王朝的覆灭多与武力祸害有关，所以历代统治者的国策都是以武打天下，以文治天下。强盛的唐王朝也因五虎当国而长期陷入战乱和分裂。安史之乱、五镇叛唐、甘露之变、黄巢起义、朱温灭唐等等，周王英当然明白重文抑武的国策更有利于皇权的长治久安。
To find a balance between civil authority and military might was never easy. It is one of the fundamental problems that has dogged China's rulers throughout history. Keep an army strong enough to defend a vast empire, yet one which would not threaten internal stability. They initially saw no use in a system that produced such an effete ruling class. But by 1315, the system had been reintroduced and was to continue after the Yuan fell to the Ming.
科举考试在实行文武并举的同时，王朝又不得不重文轻武，甚至是重文抑武。从这个过程中，不难看出帝国统治层在维护王朝安全方面的苦心孤诣。
Examinations had become a lifetime's pursuit. In the 18th century, during the reign of Emperor Qianlong of the Qing Dynasty, one Xie Qizhou from Wudang province proudly received notice
科举文科考试是常科和制科，常科是按国家规定常年举行的考试，制科则是朝廷为选拔专项人才而临时举行的考试。历代科举考试内容虽各有侧重，但无论是常科还是制科，试题范围均不出儒学，答题也必然以儒学经典为标准。尤其是明清两朝，程朱理学被尊为儒学正宗，更是科举考试的核心内容。
exams, the candidates would be evaluated in 3 ways: their writing skills in poetry and prose, their understanding of Confucian teachings, and their strategies for national affairs. Confucianism, as a political philosophy, didn't become an approved subject of study until the Han Dynasty. In 212 BC, Emperor Qin Shi Huang, founder of the Qin Dynasty, was so scornful of Confucian scholars that he allegedly had hundreds of them buried alive. When the Qin Dynasty was supplanted by the Han, Confucianism was reinvented as a justification for Han rule by blending it with other popular belief systems of the time. Under the Sui and Tang dynasties, it was Buddhism and then Taoism that gained greatest imperial patronage. But Confucian scholarship never went away. When Emperor Taizong founded the Song dynasty, there was a great movement back towards Confucianism, which the Song supported.
《论语》是由孔子的弟子编撰的，记录孔子和他跟弟子对话的一本言论集。自汉代起，《论语》被奉为儒家经典，成为士子必读的教科书和科举考试的必考内容。
The Confucianism saw orderliness and ethical behavior as crucial to society, the nation, and the universe. It was a system of duties and responsibilities between superiors and the inferiors. The key principles of Confucian teaching were benevolence, justice, propriety, while the chief virtues to which an individual should adhere are loyalty to the ruler, filial piety, and self-control. This inherently conservative mindset is naturally attractive to a ruling class, though the philosopher Mencius extols the rights of people to overturn rulers who fail to live up to their side of the social contract.
儒学崇尚日事精神，积极鼓励世人应居日事，以实现修身齐家、治国平天下的人生抱负。将儒学作为科举核心考试内容，有助于知识阶层在意识形态上与统治集团保持高度一致，有利于王朝的统治。
The imperial examination system was designed to find the most capable and talented men to serve the empire. So a second problem after on what and how to test the examinees was who should be qualified to take the examinations. Zhang Yang was the top-scoring candidate in the examinations of 980 AD under the reign of Emperor Song Taizong. He was born into a poor family who could not afford to pay for his schooling. However, he loved to study and borrowed books he needed from others. was able to memorize all the Confucian books and, in reward for his success, was appointed to official office in Sichuan, where he was highly regarded for his benevolence and integrity. One of his tasks was to oversee the conditions for travelers. He would travel around the province himself, incognito, to find out conditions on the ground. He realized that carrying large amounts of copper cash currency was very burdensome for merchants, not to mention something of a security risk. He came up with a solution: paper money. Each note was worth the equivalent of 1,000 copper coins. He had invented the world's first paper currency.
出身寒门的张勇能够跻身仕途，这是得益于科举制度。科举不为门第财富试问，使人可自由投考，凭考试成绩自由录取。国家机器因此源源不断地获得人才、新鲜血液的补充，王朝统治得以巩固。
In the Tang Dynasty, students of both public and private schools were eligible to take part in the Imperial examination. However, under the Tang, 3 classes of people have been disqualified from taking part: convicted criminals, the children of merchants, and those contracted to work for the local government. Under the Song, the restrictions on the merchant and manufacturing classes were abolished. By the Qing Dynasty, all men were eligible except for singers, actors, and other disreputable professions.
所谓娼优早立，娼优指的是娼妓和从事各种表演的民间艺人，早立是指衙门里的衙役、小吏。这4类人不仅本人被禁止参加科举考试，连他们的子孙3代也没有报考资格。但对绝大多数平民而言，科举几乎是面向全民的。
兵贡进士制度是唐代专门针对域外人士参加科举考试的一项措施。当时的长安是世界上最繁华、最开放的城市，周边很多国家都派遣留学生赴长安学习。唐朝允许这些留学生在学习中国的经济师范后参加科举考试，考中了就称为兵贡进士。
This man came to China on an Arab merchant ship via the Silk Road of the sea. Impressed by Chinese civilization, he had stayed in Chang'an and studied Chinese learning. He went to private schools and socialized with learned men. He soon became fluent in Chinese. One day he was out walking with his Chinese friend when a modest-looking carriage passed them by. Inside was Lu Jun, a minister famous for his good governance and simple lifestyle.
科举制度不为门第，甚至不像国际，这注重人的学识和才能，具有相对公平公正的竞争性。正因为如此，考试生源中平民的数量急剧攀升。
Under the Song, with the Emperor Taizong taking direct control of the palace exams, many from more modest backgrounds began to gain entry to the highest levels of authority. The trend for social mobility through the exam system that took off in the Song Dynasty accelerated after the restoration of Chinese rule in 1368 under the Ming. Now, almost half of all successful candidates come from commoner backgrounds. While success in the system offered great rewards, the pass rate was never high. Fewer than 5% of candidates ever succeeded. But those who did not pass still had status or opportunity, since to be a scholar at all was an aspiration for many, and a good living could be made simply by teaching.
科举对于国家政治的意义在于选贤以佐治。科举出身的官员在抑制宦官势力以维护皇权正业，抗衡地方割据以维护国家统一，指责时弊以谋求改革等方面发挥了相当的作用。
The early Song had a great appetite for systemization and reform. This culminated in the struggles in the mid-11th century between the modernizing chief minister Wang Ansha and the conservative faction, led by cultural icons like historian Sima Guang and poet Su Dongpo. However, now the conservative scholars who were to thwart Wang Ansha's reforms were themselves at the center of another argument over equality and regional privilege. When the palace examination results for the year 1064 were posted, one factor stood out beyond all else. The overwhelming majority of those successful candidates came from southern China. The northern candidates were deeply troubled. The system was not evenly balanced. The South enjoyed peace and prosperity, while life in the North was much harder, with a constant threat of invasion from across the Great Wall. Sima Guang, the historian and important minister from the north, proposed giving each province a quota of candidates to be admitted to the palace exams. He argued a greater number of officials with understanding of the conditions in the north were necessary to deal with the problems there. Ouyang-shu, a celebrated poet and an official from the south, was strongly against this quota system. He said it breached the principle of selection purely on merit and ability and would discriminate against Southerners.
中国幅员辽阔，地区发展不均衡，势必导致科举竞争存在强势区域和弱势区域之别。那么，科举考试是否应该按照地域差别制定相应的制度呢？这是中国科举史上第一次关于考试公平和去公平的争论。
The Emperor Song Yingzong had a dilemma. He could see the merit in Sima Guang's argument, but he was also concerned that to adopt it would not only cause unrest among students from the south, but also cause discontent among the many southern officials already serving, who would see the opportunities for their sons becoming more limited. In classic tradition, the emperor decided to do nothing.
从表面上看，是欧阳修赢了，在北宋的南北之争却引起了后世王朝关于南北地域问题的一个深层次思考。地方与地方不洽，实际关系到中央政权的稳定。作为帝国的最高统治者，皇帝当然不为袖手旁观。
In 1397, when the result of the Imperial examination was released, there were 52 successful candidates. In early March, Emperor Hongwu, founder of the Ming Dynasty, named the top 3 scholars of the year. But there was a problem. All 52 successful candidates were Southerners. Within days, the Ministry of Rights responsible for organizing the examinations was besieged by unsuccessful candidates alleging bias or corruption. The Northerners, in particular, felt the most hard done by. Outraged by the disturbance, the emperor ordered an investigation. The investigation duly concluded that the papers had been judged fairly and the officials at the Ministry of Rights had acted correctly. The best scholars had been the ones who passed. Then the emperor, in the 29th year of his reign, did something shocking.
当时北方战乱频繁，多数环境遭到破坏，而南方则相对安定，出现重磅者全是南方人，完全有可能。但朱元璋本想通过科举录取一部分北方学子，以安定和笼络北方民心，况且北方人好武，朱元璋也想在北方缔造多数氛围，并无人为文人，以换取王朝的长治久安。这是考官们哪里知道皇帝的心思，结果落得个被斩首流放的下场。
The emperor's actions can be seen as a culmination of a decades-long conflict he had with his scholar officials. He felt they were corrupt and overprivileged, secretly despising and belittling him for his peasant background and limited education. The emperor died the following year, but the exam system was then reformed to suit the differing regional conditions. A quota of the top candidates from each province went forward to the metropolitan and palace examinations in the capital, just as Sima Guang had proposed some 350 years before. This reform system was one that was to prevail for the next 5 centuries. For most of the time, it served the nation well and provided a model emulated by other powers, like the British Empire in the 19th century. The greatest minds and talents of the empire were drawn into its service, inspired by the prestige and rewards the examination system could offer. Also, as some scholars noted, it also occupied active minds in intelligent pursuits, rather than have their heads turned towards a more independent way of thinking that might offer a challenge to the authority of the center.